So the first app that I made was an English dictionary because that was perfect because I remember back in grade 5, we are all English language learners, my friends at least, and we all every time we had a word that we didn't know, we all opened a new tab, went to the dictionary, and searched it. And I was like, this is waste of time. And I always like saving time. Right? I'm always like efficiency. I always tell him. Yeah. And the app that I made was like you highlight the word, you right click on it, and then it will launch the Naver dictionary, the Korean English dictionary. And the reason that I liked it was because you can hear the pronunciation. It had everything, like example sentences. And that was it. But all my friends got it on their laptops. And some of them still have them on their phones, 7 years later, because it's still up and around. But like it's the simple things that I found not troubling, but that I tried to cut time on, and that was how I found my interest. Because I was like, I can actually make stuff do work for me. And I click on it and it's actually new stuff that I just made. It's not like I'm just using someone else's, but it was a new product, a new development, a new creation of my own. So I think that was how I got into how I found my genuine interest and how I started to branch out from there.
The full version of Richard's app can be found below. A sort of abridged quick version is he is computer whiz kid from elementary school. He's been creating his own apps. Some of them his own classmates use. He's too modest to mention in the interview, but he's won tens of thousands of dollars in awards for his various apps. These are all like national level awards in Korea. And he'll be majoring in computer science this fall at Stanford University. In our little community, the GEC, there are 4 international schools, all very competitive. And none of the schools have been able to send any students to Harvard. So when he was accepted into Harvard's computer science program, created some news in the community. It created even some more news in the community when he rejected Harvard's offer to join their CS program and opted to join Stanford this fall. I think he is our second to youngest guest. This is episode 79, Tokyo Alumni Podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Richard.
Thanks for having me.
So first, I know I did a little intro, but can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Taeuk Kang, also known as Richard from school. I've been attending Korean International School, Jeju Campus, for about 11 years now. I have and graduated just this year, class of 2022. And now I am heading to California, Stanford University, hopefully majoring computer science.
So, you have this really interesting story, and I think it's going to be sort of the focal point of what we talk about today, where the, college admissions is incredibly competitive worldwide, especially here in Korea. Yeah. And you were admitted to both Harvard and Stanford, right? Harvard, less than 10 Koreans were admitted to Harvard this year, and less than 20 were admitted to Stanford. So I guess the first question, I think this is a question a lot of people had, is I think when people choose between Harvard and Stanford, a lot of people say Harvard. Yeah. So what led towards your decision to say no to Harvard and choose Stanford?
I think it was one of the most challenging decisions that I've ever made in my life, I guess, up till now. Because both are very prestigious schools. And Harvard especially, as you might recall in East Asia, it's like very prestigious, right? Everyone knows, everyone and their grandma, and even the dog in the side road might know what Harvard is. And so that was a lot of pressure, all my friends, family were like, oh, definitely Harvard, like, because they know that very well. But for me, who's been involved in tech for a long time, knew that, Stanford and, MIT, Berkeley, stuff like that, a lot of other great places that aren't just Harvard as well. And that got me into thinking, like, where should I actually choose if I wanted to be an expert or be someone who can be successful in the field of, tech and more specifically computer science. And I started my research. So I had about a month for my research from April to May. And I've just talked to a lot of people, did my course research, stuff like that. and that's how I got to my conclusion to go to Stanford.
Were your parents pro Stanford, pro Harvard at any point? Did they have any impact on the decision you made?
So my mom is actually very lean towards Stanford because that was her dream school for me, I guess. Because it's a funny story. Because in 2016, we went to the Bay Area. We toured there as a tourist. That was my family's first time heading to the States, and I happened to stumble upon a computer coding camp for 2 weeks at Stanford. Kind of similar to how you had your soccer camp, I guess, back in the day.
Yeah.
And that was where all of our family fell in love with the Palo Alto and the Bay Area, not Stanford exactly, just because of the weather was perfect. It was always sunny. The environment, it was safe in Palo Alto. It was clean, stuff like that. And Stanford happened to be in a very good location and things like that. And that was my mother's reason for being at the dream school. And of course, it was it's an excellent educational institution also. But that's but that's true for both Harvard or other Ivy Leagues and top schools as well.
Would it be a fair assertion to say then, if it wasn't a computer science degree, that you would have considered Harvard over Stanford?
So that was where because of that decision, I met a lot of people both from Harvard alumni, current students at Harvard, and same with Stanford. And I met a mix of people, some from the tech world, some were like startup founders, some work at FANG, like Facebook, Amazon, Apple, stuff like that. And some were in like other institutions like the arts or finance in Hong Kong, stuff like that. And I guess the common opinion was that if you are interested in like double majoring or in another field like computer plus government, they were all like, maybe Harvard is a better pick. But then for computer science in general, it was definitely Stanford. But if I was to major in law, maybe I might have picked Harvard over Stanford. But it's not like Stanford sucks on those areas, because both are really really top tier. It's like number one, number two, up and down, stuff like that. So it's not so I think I might have gone to Stanford regardless, because it's not like Stanford is bad at everything except tech, right? It's not like that. So yeah.
Interesting. And it's, as I was mentioning earlier, fiercely competitive environment where we where I work and where you were a student until just a month ago, the global education city, people spend at times $20,000, $15,000 on consultants to help get into good colleges. Did you use a consultant?
Because so many of my friends have consultants, and it's the general atmosphere, as you mentioned. I did look into one, and first of all, it was too expensive. Like, it's unsustainable. Like, it costs as much as our school. And if you add in all like the extra packages, like the SAT tutoring over the summer, writing a report, like a science paper, publishing it, like it's like that's more expensive than our school's tuition, which is already a lot. So I didn't get like a consultant to do all my projects and stuff like that, because I think I always wanted to find my own way, because I don't like having someone tell me what to do, because I don't know, I just didn't like that. And same, I guess that's kind of similar to my approach with hagwons, because it's like if you go to a hagwon, they give you a list of stuff to do, like memorize these words. Like, I hated it, and I'm I guess kind of bad at it. Maybe that's why I hate it. But like, it just seemed so irrelevant to me, and I just didn't feel like spending time on it was worthwhile. So I guess that was why I rejected it. And I did get some help, from whether it's teachers at our school or some people outside to like help revise the English part of it. But that was the extent, because it's not like building like the whole story, but maybe like the writing part. Like, I could ask a teacher at my school or other people I know.
So no consultants.
Yeah.
Mostly your work.
Yeah.
You mentioned how you're now a big fan of the hagwon culture. I think a big question a lot of people have too is, what do you think was your secret that got you competitive enough to get into Columbia, Harvard, Stanford. Again, what did you do that you felt gave you, so-called edge to get into those top tier universities?
I think it's about being genuine with what you like to do, right? Because a lot of the consultants and people in the field are like, oh, you need to take 2 years of a foreign language. You need to do some instrument. You need to do some I don't know, athletics, sports, and I did none of that. Like I actually talked to like a free consultant. I've seen a seminar and they were like, hey, you need to do Spanish. And I was like, no, I'm not gonna do Spanish because like, hey, I'm bad at learning languages, and it just wasn't an interesting thing for me. Yeah. And same with music. I did band for 2 years, but I think I did it just because everyone else was doing it, rather than I was interested in music. So I quit when I was in 10th grade because I was like, okay, I'm done with this. And with sports, I haven't done any sports, I guess, as you might be aware. But I've been very genuine with the things that I was passionate about. In my case, which was coding and programming and building stuff on computers and phones so that people can actually use. And I think that was clearly, that message was clearly transmitted on my applications, whether it was through essays or through activities or through awards or recommendations. Like all these pointing towards one thing to support my genuine passion for computer science in my case, or for in other people's whatever whatever their route took them to. But I think that was the main differentiating factor, because I guess you also mentioned like stuff like grades or SATs. I think those are basically checklists at this point, right? Like a pilot will have a pre-flight checklist and stuff that they must have. But like at a certain point, if you look at the statistics, most people have like a 15, 50, stuff like a very high SAT at Ivy Leagues, and top 20s in general, 4.0 GPA, 3.9, 4.0 GPA. So it's basically like, it's not like special when you have 50 applications, hundreds of applications with those kinds of scores. Like it's like, of course you need to have that at this point. So I think that was why, like, oh, I have 10 APs. Like it doesn't look that impressive because everyone has it in top 20 competing field. Maybe in other schools, maybe that's not the case, but I think for top 20s at least.
So I'm totally mind blown actually now that I think about it. No sports, right? And we were just talking a bit off air earlier about how that is, like, as you said, the hagwons kind of have these equations, right?
Yeah.
Have this many APs, this many sports, this many whatever, and that will get you in. You had 0 sports.
Yeah.
Not even one season of cross country or something. You had 0. And as you mentioned, I think a very important point was you're genuine about your interest. So if maybe you could explain and elaborate a bit more about that too, because I think a lot of the times it becomes a game, right? People are saying, oh, I like global issues, that's why I'm doing MUN or something, or I care about the environment, that's why I'm in the beach cleaning club or something. There's nothing wrong with either of those, but in your case, because you were genuinely interested in engineering and coding, how did you pursue those interests outside of school, and how was that maybe different than just simply like being part of the engineer coding club or something?
So I guess there's one thing that I actually wrote down was it's about not activities that are composed of single events, or award or a publication, because a lot of people have like, oh, I have one engineering award, I have this one, but they're not really the dots are not connected. But I think in my case, I think it was all a cohesive story or journey, right? Because it's not like you can just build an app and call it a day, right? Because that app is useless if no one is using it, right? Or if you're cleaning a beach, but you just clean it for one day and you're gone, then the beach is gonna be dirty the next day. It's like you need to be like, if you're like actually genuinely devoted towards the environment or global issues, like you'd be approaching it every day, not with large impactful projects that last for a short period of time, but small things that build up to larger projects which are clearly more genuine, because you can't publish 10 research papers every month, right? That, like, obviously that is either fake or just very low quality. But I think in my case, like, I didn't have more than one coding project a year, because you can't make more than one stuff, like, because it's just me doing it on my own time, and my full-time job, I guess, is school, right? Like, so, like, I think everyone, whether it's college admissions office, they all recognize that, right? Because you can't do 5 billion things at once.
Yeah.
So, for example, in 2020, my focus was I was running a team that made COVID maps that the Jeju government used. But because I was able to, because our team was serious about that map, we were in contact with the local government. Like, people were actually using it. Like, there was on the news, the policeman was using it on his phone, right? Like, it's actual impactful thing, impactful change that's you can actually see, right? Like, it might not benefit everyone, but, like, for example, like, when you went to the Jeju city government website, like, it had a link to our website. So, like, that people are actually using it, and we had millions of people visit it. So it's like an actual genuine devotion that I had. And sometimes I had to wake up in the middle of the night to update a number, because a new case transpired during the night.
Yeah.
But, like, you can't just do that on a single day. You're like, oh, I'm gonna create a COVID map, and just create it and just let it just I guess die out, because then it's just not very useful. And I'm sure there were, like, billions, hundreds of other maps as well. But I think what separated, I guess it was our team, was that, like, we were actually maintaining it for a long period of time.
I think we need to take a one step back, though, and I think, and it's a kind of an unfortunate question, but it comes up a lot, I think, in our school, is how do you find something you're genuine in? Because my worry would be someone would hear what you just said, and they would do their own project, let's say about hospital maps or whatever, and they say, oh, I'm genuinely, care about that, but they don't really care, And so my question is, if we go one step before that, at what point for you was coding something you knew you really liked? Because, again, as you would know, unfortunately, there's a lot of students, not only in GSC but in Korea. You ask them, what do you like to do? And that's actually why I get along very well with the soccer kids, because they're not lying about it. When a kid says they like soccer, they're not thinking about college admissions. It's genuine. Yeah. But when a kid says, I like, fill in the blank, something that's a little bit academic, I go, okay, why is that? Like why do you really? And then I, honestly, more than half the time, I don't really get an answer.
Yeah.
So in your case, obviously coding is very academic. It goes linear right into that CS career path.
Yeah.
What ignited that interest, and at what point did you know, all right, this is something I want to do? This is genuine, as you would say.
Finding interest is really hard, and I can feel that, and because a lot of my friends are like, hey, what are you interested about? And I'm interested in this, but, like, I never seen them do that outside of like their own time, right? Because I think the first step is to gain exposure, like whether it's reading the news or watching someone going to a sport event, and you might be like, oh, soccer is fun, or going to the musical and be like, oh, theater is something that I care about. Or not even just acting, but you might be at a musical and you see the lights show, and you're like, oh, that's cool, and you might find interest. But I think a lot of people just don't try to find that moments of exposure, right? They're just stuck at home, doing scrolling mindlessly through Instagram, TikTok, and like, oh, what's my interest? Like, you might, I guess, find it there, but, like, I think you actually need to, like, get up and do something to try to find it. And for me, how I find my interest was, Dad bought a new laptop when I was like 6 or 7. I just liked punching random stuff, like maybe your cat sometimes does it on your laptop right now.
Yeah.
But I did that, and I didn't know what I was tinkering about. But for some reason, I liked doing that, because my mom was typing, doing her work, and I was like, oh, I just do the random stuff. But then as I interacted with it, as I just for fun, like watching videos and stuff like that, I was like, I asked myself, like, wait, what if I can make something that does stuff that I want to do? Because I'm always the consumer, right? I'm always, watching YouTube, going to Google, but it's always stuff that someone else made. So that was, I think, what got my interest. And I went to the library because that was a thing 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I just borrowed like a random textbook that was about coding. And it was this thick. And there was no way that I would understand it.
Yeah.
And my mom took that book and me to a hagwon that was a computer hagwon that was just across the road from our home. And then the teacher, the lady who taught, was just like, no. Like she was just like, oh, there's no way that this kid is gonna learn this. And we were just like, she didn't even let us in after looking at that book. And me, it was like, that kid is gonna learn that. Like that kind of attitude. And I never liked that attitude. I'm like, of course I can do. So I think that was when I started to find the, my own more, whether it was like going to the library and finding a textbook, or these days YouTube, there's so much stuff on YouTube that you can just follow a tutorial and learn, or just googling and stuff like that. And I think I got into making a very small program. So my very first program, and I thought it was super cool back then, but the program was an app that ran on the computer, that were shortcuts to the websites and to the apps that I used often. So that I didn't have to search for it. It was like and it was very simple, very basic. But then I was like, I can make stuff. It was like putting together a Lego blocks and actually building stuff that was useful, and that got me to thinking, well, I can build more stuff that's not just for me, because that was what I built, right? It was essentially to save my own time. So the first app that I made was an English dictionary. Because that was perfect, because I remember back in grade 5, we were all English language learners, my friends at least, and we all every time we had a word that we didn't know, we all opened a new tab, went to the dictionary and searched it. And I was like, this is waste of time. And I always like saving time. Right? I'm always like efficiency. I always tell him. And the app that I made was like, you highlight the word, you right click on it, and then it will launch the Naver dictionary, the Korean English dictionary. And the reason that I liked it was because you can hear the pronunciation. It had everything, like example sentences, and that was it. But all my friends got it on their laptops, and some of them still have them on their phones, like 7 years later, because it's still up and around. But like, it's the simple things that I found troubling, not troubling, but that I tried to cut time on. And that was how I found my interest, because I was like, I can actually make stuff do work for me. And I click on it, and it's actually new stuff that I just made. It's not like I'm just using someone else's, but it was a new product, a new development, a new creation of my own. So I think that was how I got into how I found my genuine interest, and how I started to branch out from there.
And it connects well into that idea of intrinsic versus extrinsic interest, right? There's that clear intrinsic interest. And I guess, as you said, I think the biggest question middle school, high school, to a certain degree, maybe fifth graders would be like, how do I find that interest? And as you said, you just got to expose yourself to so many different opportunities. And
one thing that I now reflect back is like with classes in middle school and elementary school, a lot of people take like, I'm gonna take Spanish, or I'm gonna take something because I'm gonna prepare for high school. But now looking back at that, and I was quite focused on my grades back then as well, but that was just not a total waste of my time, but that shouldn't have been my focus. Because first of all, like, none of those middle and elementary transcripts are going anywhere. Like, that's just for me and my parents to look at.
No one ever sees it.
Right? No one ever sees it. So I think, like, when parents or families or counselors tell middle school students, to truly find their passion, a lot of the kids are like, I'm going to do MUN, or I'm going to do something, I'm going to do Chinese. But I think you really, I would like to tell them to really open up their doors. Maybe I should try art. I hate art, but you might you might still register for it and you might get a C, but who cares, right? It's a middle school art transcript. Like no one is gonna look at it. Or if you don't like athletics, maybe it's time to try athletics.
That's an excellent point. That ultimately we can make mistakes anywhere in our lives and we can still reset, right? But with that said, at least when you can think of the confines of K through 12, middle school is that time period, right? As you said, who cares if you have all A's or half A's and half B's? No one cares. Whereas instead, if you have that opportunity to take all these other classes that maybe you're not that strong in, but you might grow interest in it, that is worth 10 times, an A. It's a really good point. So did you feel like KIS helped prepare you for, this next step now that you're going to Stanford as a computer science major? In what ways do you think the school has helped you, and what ways do you think the school could improve?
I guess everything, like all the choices that I guess my parents made, especially with education earlier in my earlier ages, were built up towards that, because my parents moved me from like a standard Korean kindergartens, like pre-K, K, to an English-speaking one. And because of that English exposure, I was able to, speak the language, and gain access to it, because, I guess you still have the Korean public education system use English, but it's, 1 hour, a week. Like, that's not going to be enough for language exposure. So I guess that's where my actual English learning started. And then I had 1 year of Korean public school education, 1.5 years. But I think I hated it and my parents hated it because of just the amount of rote memorization, and it was just like labor. I was doing education as like a labor rather than actually for the sake of learning, because we had like these big, I was in grade 1 by the way, but we had these big test prep books that flipped this way so that it can have more pages, and I just do that all day.
Wow.
And I get tired of it.
Yeah.
And then and I would be like, I'm not gonna do this, and and then my parents would be like, but you need to do this for the test. But like they didn't force me to do it, so they looked at other opportunities so that where I can actually do stuff that I was interested in. In my case, it was coding, where I can spend that time. I'm not memorizing how to use a musical instrument. Like we had a music class in my grade 1 Korean public school, but we had a written theory test, like, which beat should I use to beat this traditional Korean drum. Like I guess that's important, but it's not like something like a grade 1 student should be memorizing for a test, right? If it's not like I'm even playing the drum, I'm just doing this for the sake of the test. So it's like, that kind of a tremendous waste of time and energy into tests rather than actual learning, plus that I had no opportunity to have my own time to pursue my own interest, because whether it was because everyone else went to hagwons and stuff like that after school. So that was why they started looking into these international schools and an alternative curriculum, because I think that's what the ideal American Canadian curriculum is known for, is that they allow people to spend their own time. They have a reasonable education experience, plus they allow kids to pursue their own interest as well.
In theory.
Yeah, in theory. Yes, that's an important part for our later conversation. So that's why we moved to KISJ. And why KISJ within the GC? Back then there was only 2 schools, KISJ and NLCS, in 2011. So it's either the American education or a British education, and we chose the American one. So that's why I went to KISJ. And I have...
Why though? Why American curriculum over the British curriculum?
I think, well, it's my parents that chose, because like I was too young to do my own research, right? It's like I didn't know what the IB program, the AP program was. But I think, especially in East Asia, or these days, America is the hub for development, right? Google, places like Google, Apple, they're all American companies.
True.
A lot of the development, is happening there. And it's not that the British curriculum is bad, right? In some ways, I'm sure the IB is better than what we have. But I think that's where we were more, like, if I were to get a job or if I were to immigrate later after I graduate, like long term back then, like I think America was the choice that I think that I would have made. So that was why I went to an American.
That's
school.
fair. That's
Yeah.
fair. You never asked your parents later on just why didn't I go to NLCS instead of KIS?
And also, KISJ was a bit cheaper.
A bit cheaper, yeah. That always plays a role too.
Yeah.
And what were we talking about again? We were talking about why KISJ. And yeah, I mean, you attend KISJ for, was it 10 years?
11 years.
For 11 years.
Yeah.
Do you feel like KISJ has been able to provide you with that sort of quote-unquote Western type of education that maybe focuses more on sort of creativity and individualism as opposed to, you know, sort of rote memorization?
When I first got here, and I guess especially during elementary and middle, I think that was the case. Because I had a lot of time. Like, I never stayed up till, you know, even 10 p.m. when I was in elementary school. While all my public school friends were at hagwons at 10 p.m. Like, they were active.
Wow. This is elementary school,
Yeah.
to confirm. Wow.
Yeah, elementary school. And, you know, and my parents would drive by, and they would always see us, you know, in grade 3, grade 4, out on the field. So they were like, are you, like, not learning? Right? Because we were all day in the field and stuff like that. And you don't really have that time or that opportunity in the public schools. So I think, in theory, that started out very well. And I said, when I first got into coding when I was in grade 4 and grade 5 when I made that app, I had a lot of time to pursue that on my own after I was back from school. And the homework was reasonable. But as time passed and I got to middle and high, first of all, hagwons were created. When I was in elementary school, kids didn't go to hagwons not because parents didn't send them to, but because there was nowhere to send their kids to, because, you know, there was nothing.
There were no hagwons in the GC, is what you mean. Yeah.
There was only like one apartment, school, and like a small road that connected it.
Yeah.
Right? And like in the mornings I would take walks and you would see like a wild animal there because, you know, it's their habitat that we are on. So it's that, you know, empty. So I guess that was, but as years passed by, hagwons were coming in, and then, you know, once they're there, a lot of parents sent them, and so the competitive nature grew within our group.
So what you got away from came back.
Yeah. And now there's this whole hagwon town, like buildings of hagwons, like 4 buildings just for hagwons, you know, and, you know, other tutoring places, you know, and homes, you know.
Yeah.
So there's just so many hagwons that I guess that whole nature that I was here, that theory just broke down. But my parents were still resistant towards it. Like, they let me choose. So they were like, if you want to go to a hagwon, like, you can choose to do that, like, if I need that extra help.
Yeah.
But I didn't need that. So for most of my elementary, middle, and high, I was not at a hagwon. I was just usually at right. I clocked right out of school at 3:35 and just went straight home because, you know, as I said, I didn't do athletics, other activities except for, you know, NUN or my other clubs. So that's how So I guess we need to go back to the question.
Yeah, I mean, so KIS is education. So you've attended for 11 years. Yeah. So basically the entirety, although you did get a taste of that Korean public school education. So do you feel like, you know, it was in fact, you know, a change? Do you feel like you were a beneficiary of this Western education? And in what ways would you wish things maybe had transpired differently?
Yeah, so I think the opportunity to get the time, to have access to the time that I needed to pursue my own passion was what allowed me to, you know, get into those schools. I think that's what I think it is. So if, for example, so is it KIS that allowed me to do that? Maybe, but like I don't think. But if I moved to another international school, whether it was in this country, whether it was to another one in the GC, or maybe one in Seoul, or at a foreign country, would I still be able to do the same thing? I think so. So is it unique to KIS? No, but I think the unique nature of the education itself that in theory allows personal time to develop stuff, because you're not expected technically to go to a hagwon, is what allowed me to do my stuff, and which allowed me to get into places like that.
Interesting. So just having that, I don't know really the English word. In Japanese we would say yoyu, right? Having that leisure, I suppose, of doing what you want to do. And I guess that would be the algorithm, right, for my YouTube would say at this point probably no one's really watching. But if any kids or parents are watching, that would be my perspective, being here for 10 years now, is it goes back to what you mentioned earlier with their genuineness, intrinsic motivation. At some point it gets back to you, and it's so obvious, as you would know too from being here for from elementary, middle, high. There are always students, again we were talking about this off air a bit, who will say, what are you into? I'm into global affairs. Why are you into global affairs? Then they don't know why. And you kind of wonder, are they really into it? And it's so many scenarios like that. So I think what it comes down to is being able to find that intrinsic motivation. And I think maybe some parents are overly optimistic, that they believe, well, if I send my kid to coding camp for 3 years, by the 3rd year, he or she is going to grow interest. But as you were mentioning, the nature of human beings is when someone forces you to go do something, you don't want to do it all of a sudden. Maybe they are interested in coding, but if you send them to camp 3 years in a row, they're not going to be interested. So I think you bring up a great point that, to have that leisure, not have so much rote memorization. And my last question for you is what I ask all the guests, is what do you envision yourself doing several years from now? And I thought for you, maybe 10 years would be a fun sort of estimate. So it is 2022 today. 2032, right? The internet's forever, so you'll hopefully see this video in 2032. So in 2032, 10 years from now, so you'd be in your 6th year after graduating with a bachelor's, maybe 4th year after a master's. What are you doing? Where are you living? And what are you pursuing then?
It would be cool if I could be like a startup founder in the Bay Area with a cool idea that's saving the world, but to be serious, to have actual impact. It doesn't need to be like let's save the whole world, save the earth, make it a better place, but having a decent product that will that actually makes impact for certain people. I guess that's a good plan. But if not, I could be working as an engineer, or find my job, find the passion, and working in whether it's the tech field or not, because even in other fields, computer science, I think these days are like a core thing. It's like electricity, right? Like a few hundred years ago, electricity was for scientists to play around, right? Normal people didn't have electricity. But once that electricity got in and it became a standard, right? Even if you're not a scientist, you're using products that use electricity. Or same thing with computers, right? Back then we had people compute stuff, and then we had typewriters whose job was to type. But now everyone types, right? It's typing is not a job, it's just part of another. I think computers is gonna be, it's same thing with computers, right? Like we have AI and stuff like that. But AI is just going to be a part of, it's either a history AI that, looks at historical artifacts and extracts stuff, or, I don't know, like science AI or math AI. So I think because it's going to be like a sprinkled around different fields, I think I'd be able to apply what I learned, what I have learned in the field of computer science, and, maybe doing an interesting job. Maybe I'd be like, archaeologist who knows computers, and I can use it to decipher old texts with AI. I don't know, very exotic job. Maybe that's something that I could.
Will you be in the States 10 years from now?
Well, so I guess for at least 4 years I'll be in college, and for additional 3 years I think I can stay in the US because I am in the STEM field, there's a visa OPT program that allows me to be there. So that's 7 years for sure that I can be in the States if I wanted to. Maybe 8 if I pursue masters, and if I get a job and if it's good enough, and then I'll stay in the States. Maybe be a resident there. I don't know, but now that I've been in this international environment, it's not total international, right? Because I speak Korean once I leave school, right? But it's still that I think I have a different mindset than like a standard Korean. And which one is better? I don't think that there's an answer, right? But I think to a certain extent, I think I might be more compatible with how people think in the States or in other places rather than in Korea. Whether it's the work culture, right? Sometimes I won't understand the Korean work culture because I see, not just at our school, but because I look at the foreign media, I look at foreign TV, like those are, because I'd be like I feel closer towards there rather than and a Korean work culture or something like that. So I think maybe I'll stay in the States. That's definitely a possibility. Maybe I'll return. I might not know, or maybe I might be in like a different country, right?
Sure.
A workcation. I think that's something that's very interesting to pursue. But I'm very open to different.
Yeah, and
options.
you never know, right?
Yeah,
As I've told you, this is my 8th year in Korea, and if someone told me when I was 18 he'd live in Korea for like almost a decade, I would never in 1,000 years have believed that.
Yeah.
So that's great that you're open-minded. I wish you the best luck of. So that takes us to the end here. I've been kind of looking at the camera, I wasn't sure where to look at. I'm looking at the camera here at the end. You weren't our youngest guest, actually. You're the second youngest guest.
Oh, really?
Of our 70 episodes. You are the first student from our little community, GEC, to be admitted to Harvard, though. And you're also the first to reject Harvard. So congratulations on that. And best of luck, being a computer science major at Stanford University. Something you're obviously very intrinsically interested in and motivated. It's been great to sort of confirm with you on air, because for those who live in our little town know that was a big talk in our little community of that someone got into Harvard was a big deal. Secondly, someone rejected Harvard was also a big deal. So it's kind of interesting to clarify all that. And I wish you the best of luck. Thank you so much for being a guest, and hopefully we'll have you back on maybe in the future to talk about maybe something about Stanford or whatever.